Things have felt very strange in the Raleigh real estate market. We've definitely felt a slowdown, but things just feel really weird, like something's just not right. I know people are talking all over the internet about price drops and market crashes, and there's no doubt that we've seen changes. In a way, things are kind of nice for buyers right now because when a property comes on the market, there isn't immediately a dozen offers significantly over list price, at least not on every property. But for sellers, things are a little more uncertain. Has the boom finally busted? Did they miss the chance to get on the bandwagon? In today's video, we're going to talk about all of that, but I've also got a secret for you. I spoke with an insider in the Bay Area tech scene. This is somebody who is a top-level executive at a large tech firm who called me about his relocation, but while we were chatting, he was willing to share some secrets with me, as long as I was willing to keep his name out of it, about what's happening out there in Silicon Valley and how it's going to affect the economy here, and it definitely will affect our economy. We'll get to that in just a minute, but the other thing that is totally crazy is the psychological reaction that sellers are having to this market shift just does not seem right. The way people are behaving doesn't match the market conditions I'm seeing in the data, and it makes sense because in the last couple of years, things have been so crazy out of the ordinary that people don't know what to expect, and they see very slight blips in how things are happening, and they get scared and they react. These kinds of shifting and uncertain markets are when a buyer can snag a great deal, so you definitely want to see all this data I'm getting ready to share. And if you're a seller, also, you want to get very good consultation to make sure you're reacting correctly to the actual market conditions, which aren't necessarily the same thing as the headlines on your favorite news source. But let's look at the real data so we can see what's happening right now. To understand what's happening, let's look at the first half of the year from January to June. Now, all the data isn't in yet for June, but I can see everything that was listed in the MLS and that is closed up to the point of the writing of this video, which happens to be taking place on June 26th. So look at this. From January through June, the percent that the median property price increased per month fluctuated from a 2% decrease in May to a 6% increase in April. Now, you can see that the biggest increases took place in March and April, and that's a totally normal seasonal type of competition that would be driving higher value increases in the spring. Also, notice that 2% decrease in median price in May. It's important. It's normal for there to be some months of the year when homes sell for less than others, and summer tends to be slower. Usually it's July and August that are pretty slow. If I'm listing a property, I really like to see it under contract before July 4th, because after that, historically, properties tend to sit. And so if you're buying, it's easier to get deals during that time. But actually, this whole conversation about median prices going up and down can be somewhat misleading. Prices did not really drop in May. I know it sounds like I just said that they dropped 2% in May, but I actually don't think they did. This is why the whole conversation is misleading. Let me explain what I mean. Mortgage rates got over 5% for the first time between March and April of this year. So we had a big surge when that happened of people trying to get in and buy a home before rates shot up too high. In March and April, we've got a bunch of properties that went under contract. Those contracts closed in April and May, but what happened in May? We had the first price drop in median home price this year. How is it possible to have a drop in median home price in the same month that we have the highest percent over list being paid? That, my friends, is a clue to what is really happening. Median property value increases or decreases doesn't mean that the same home that sold last month will sell for X% more or less this month. I mean, it can mean that, but it doesn't have to. And in this case, I don't think that's what it means at all. I think that with the mortgage rate increase, people adjusted their budgets. If someone's budget had previously been $500,000, now they might be looking at homes in the $400,000s. And so there were more buyers in a lower price point, which shifted the median price point home to a lower price point. Prices didn't drop. People made offers on homes with lower list prices than they had previously been planning to make, but they made strong offers because they were worried that the interest rate spike was going to price them out of the market. That's exactly what I did with the home I'm under contract for right now. I ended up buying something about $80,000 less than I had originally planned, but I didn't buy the same type of house for $80,000 less. I bought something slightly smaller on a slightly smaller lot. I'm positive that's what's happening because the number of people buying has actually increased. We're on track to close 1,950 655 homes in Raleigh in June, which is almost 3 times what was closed in April. And for the percent over list to increase like it did in April, you have to have competition. Now, buyer competition is not as bad as it was because the reason we were able to sell more homes in June was because there were more listings to choose from. It seems to me like we've still got pretty good competition, just with more options for buyers to choose from. So, with these changes to the market, how do we know if a home is overpriced? One of the ways we can tell is by the number of days it takes to sell a home compared to the number of showings we're getting. At Hunter Rowe, we relentlessly track data, and we know that if we don't get 10 showings in the first week, the property is 1 to 2% overpriced. If we only get 1 or 2 showings, it's probably 10% overpriced. Because homes are still selling in about 3 days, prices should not be dropping. Keep in mind that the average days on the market in this chart takes into account all the properties, ones that look awful and smell like cat and cigarettes, or those people who listed their home at $2 million when it's really worth $900,000 and it sat there for a month before they believed that they needed to drop the price. That's all averaged into this number. The median number is much more indicative of how long it really takes to sell a home, which is 3 days. And I don't hate cats or cigarettes, so be nice to me in the comments. Actually, cigarettes are gross. Now, let's look at a comparison of what happened in April, which had that 6% median price increase, and this month, June, to see how much the market has slowed since then. And also, let me say that this data is for properties with a Raleigh address, whether they're in the city limits or not, and the results here were significantly different than the results were when I looked at everything listed in the MLS. And you're definitely going to want to see that. But let's start with Raleigh. In April, 12% of properties that sold discounted their prices, and in June, 15% of properties dropped their prices. So there was a 3% increase in price reductions when comparing April to June. The next thing I want to know is, was it actually necessary? Was there actually less competition, or was that just sellers worrying and prematurely dropping prices? It's important to know this because what we really want to know is what is likely to happen in the future, and we need to understand the present and the past to anticipate the future. We need to know if sellers were responding to actual market conditions or not. This graph shows that in April, the percentage of properties selling in that first weekend is a lot more than in June. In June, it was weighted much more towards the 3 to 7 day window to sell. People are kind of nervous now and just waiting to see what's going to happen, so they're not making their offer when it first hits the market, but then a few days later, boom, offers come in. And you can tell that the demand is still there because even though fewer people bought in that 0 to 3 day window, more properties sold in 2 weeks or less in June than in April. So it's like they hung back a minute trying to see what's going to happen in the market. If we wait another week, are we going to get a deal? But then ultimately they do go ahead and buy, and like we saw in the previous graph, very few of them make offers below list price. This is a similar thing that happened when I offered on my house. It sat for a week or two and we made an offer, and then other offers came in as well. It's like people know it's less crazy if it's not new on the market, so they're waiting to make offers on lagging listings. Now, like I just said, this is totally different than what happened when we look at all properties in the MLS, which covers about 17 counties. Look at this. In June, 66% of listings dropped their price in the Greater Triangle area compared to 15% in Raleigh. So it really matters where you're buying or selling. But you know what else? The median days to sell is only 2 days in the Greater Triangle area. It's my opinion that at least some of these price drops are due to sellers just not being used to properties not selling in the first weekend. Not all of them, but definitely some of them are premature. And I don't think it's going to last, but I have to explain the next piece of the puzzle before I tell you my big secret news. The days on the market tells us what happened last month. Now we need to look at the absorption rate, which tells us what's happening right now. The absorption rate tells us how long it will take for the current homes on the market to completely sell out if they continue to sell at the same rate they have over the past month. Of course, we don't know what that rate they will sell at is until after they sell, but this is the moving target we keep our eye on to notice market changes. We've only got 26 days of data, so that's what we're looking at. So in the first 26 days of June, there were 617 homes closed. That means we sold 23 homes per day. As of today, we've got 677 homes active on the market in Raleigh, which at that rate will take us 28 days to completely sell out, which means we have 0.95 months of inventory. In May, we had 0.9 months, and in April, we had 0.7 months. So inventory is ticking up ever so slightly each month. Remember, inventory does fluctuate throughout the year, and absorption rate is usually lowest in the spring because that's when most people are buying. Also, a buyer's market is 6 months of inventory. We are still far, far away from that. Having said that, we just saw that some properties are sitting on the market for a couple of weeks at a time. And I just want to say right here that I think in this market in particular, we're going to have some stops and starts as people try to hedge their bets and figure out what's going to happen. We still have a considerable demand for housing, but at the same time, people are scared to buy. I don't blame them for being scared. These are crazy, crazy times with everything that's happening. But I'm going to tell you right now, the real truth, here it is, the Raleigh housing market is different. You might be hearing crazy things about the housing markets throughout the country.
The housing market's slowing down because you see higher rates are having an effect.
Hundreds are being cut or reassigned in JP Morgan's mortgage unit as housing demand begins to
So that prices won't necessarily come down, but price increases will flip.
And I'm sure there are places whose markets are going to do some considerable adjusting from the economic conditions we're seeing. But our economy in Raleigh is different, and what we have seen with business relocations over the last 2 years, listen to me, the flood is only just beginning. A couple of days ago, I had a Zoom call with an executive from a tech company in Silicon Valley. He told me that his company, and the word on the street is that lots of other companies are thinking the exact same way. They're all planning their growth strategies, and they have no plans to do any more expanding in the Bay Area. The Bay Area can't support any more people. He told me that because of the water and the lay of the land, there's nowhere to expand and no physical way to bring in more people. They already sit on bridges and in traffic for hours. He also told me that Austin has already started to feel the same growing pains, and according to this person, everyone's eyes are on the triangle. And when I say everyone, I mean corporate executives from major tech firms. He also revealed to me that both Apple and Facebook are planning a campus of about 10,000 people each, which is significantly more than the news reported about Apple when they first announced that they were moving to the triangle. I think they said 3,000 originally. Personally, while everyone is backing off and afraid to buy houses, I'm going to be buying. I'm going to be looking for opportunities because I think this hesitation in the market is momentary. I still think it's possible that we will have some stagnation on the way to that growth, but I don't think it's going to last. I could be wrong, but the more and more evidence I see, it just points to the idea that RTP is absolutely on its way to a large world-class city. I'm not saying whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm personally a big fan of small towns. I don't like living in big cities, but I don't control the world. I just respond to what I see. If you like this video, you might also like this one where I talk about whether Raleigh is the next San Francisco.